tell us about this constant companion whom you have with you all the time.
Well, Mr. H, people think I have to go around with a stuffed toy to feel, closer to the forest. But actually, one of my reasons for hope is the indomitable human spirit. And he was given to me by a man who exemplifies the indomitable human spirit. Because, we find people who tackle seemingly impossible tasks, either because they have to face poverty or because they have to face crippling physical disabilities, all these kind of things. And this is Mr. H, because he was given to me by a man called Gary Horn, who went totally blind when he was 21, decided to become a magician, was told, Gary, you can't be a good magician if you're blind. He said, I can try. And the children don't know he's blind. And then he'll tell them and say, things may go wrong in your life because we never know. But if they do, you must never give up. There's always a way forward. So he does scuba diving and skydiving and climbs mountains. Thought he was giving me a chimpanzee, and I made him hold the tail. Gary, chimps don't have tails. He said, never mind, take him where you go, and my spirit's with you. So we've been together into 59 countries, and he's getting very delicate.
All right. We'll give him pride of place right up front there then. Okay, we've got Xiang and Had, as I said. Could I ask for the both of you for your initial reactions to Dr. Goodall's presentation earlier? Had or Zuyang?
Well, thank you, Dr. Goodall, for that really enlightening keynote speech. I think, I'm sure everyone in this room is among the enlightened, and if you weren't when you walked in, you probably are by now. But I think that's what it's about. When you look at this whole idea of sustainable living in an urbanizing world, what it meant to me about 8 years ago, the Singapore Environment Council, who I was with then, we had something called a Green Living exhibition. And we basically fabricated a show flat with a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bedroom. And in it, we put a lot of eco products that were all labeled. And that was, at that time, my perception of green living or sustainable living. And I think it's true to say it's the perception of a lot of us. We confine it to living, the concept of living as what's in our home, what's within the boundaries of the walls in which we live. I think I have a very enlightened concept of sustainable living now, and it goes way beyond that. It goes into how we travel, how we move around every day. And a lot of the deforestation and all that's happening in our region that Dr. Goodall talked about is really driven by our demand. So, it's our concept of material, and it even goes beyond sustainable living in a city. I think we can do a lot in terms of being sustainable in a city. Urban farming is an example. We worry about energy security like mad. Singapore hasn't really done a lot to tackle food security. So there's another broader band around our homes, and there is an even broader band into our region. So the concept of living goes beyond our homes, it goes beyond our precinct, it goes beyond our city, it goes beyond our shores. And I think Singapore can actually contribute a lot. And I'll just give you an example. I'm not boasting, but I'm just give you an example of something that I'm working on at the moment that involves microfinance. I've joined the dark side. I now work for a company called the Halcyon Group, and we do rubber processing in Indonesia, in Palembang to be exact. And we inherited 2 rubber processing plants, terribly smelly sites that are over 25 years old. So 2 months ago, I went to do a sustainability assessment of these two plants and more or less to find out what we needed to do, what's the work involved. And I discovered, we employ about 300 workers. We have land for their whole families to live on. We give them land to grow their food. There's a mosque. There's a church. But, there was rubbish all over the place. There was just no ownership of the land that we had given to them for free. There's no running water. They all bathe in river water, and there's no proper sanitation. And they have to buy bottled water to drink. So that puts a strain on their income, all right? And it's only the men that work, and the women do very little. So what's Singapore good at? We're good at water filtration technology. So we went to the Singapore Institute of Membrane Filtration, and we found out that they have a rural solution, a cheap solution for membrane filtration that only costs $800. Amazing. So I went to my directors, they say, hey, can we buy 12 of these? It's not expensive. And he goes, okay, sure, go and buy them. And the idea is to give these or loan these to the women that don't work around our plant so that they can actually sell clean water at a much cheaper price than bottled water. It solves our litter problem. It creates enterprise. There's less drain on the income of the families there. And eventually, they pay us back little by little, and eventually they will own these membrane filtration units. And what about the technical know-how? We have technicians in our factories that can brief these ladies in Bahasa on how to maintain and use these things. So we're giving them purpose, we're giving them dignity. Eventually, we hope to cultivate the mindsets of these villages to actually have a greater sense of ownership of the land and restore it to its former glory.
Thank you, Had. Zuyang?
I guess like Howard, I'm an urban boy. I grew up in an environment very different from the one you described, Dr. Jane. And so indeed, I think early lessons were very much formed in the changes that happened in Singapore in the early years until today. And whilst I have gone out to work, and I think again, like Howard, I'm a technology optimist in the sense that we have seen what innovation and new ways on the supply side, if I can adopt economics kind of approach. On the supply side, we have become a lot more clever. I fully understand and agree with Dr. Jane that we have to look at the demand side as well, and that the demand for goods and services, what is it that people want in terms of a better life, is actually going to be as important or maybe even more important than whatever we invent on the supply side. And I think in many industries we have discovered that whilst we believe we've come up with the next great idea, unless you have a market, unless people believe that this is what is in their interest, then it doesn't work. I think the other thing that we have to do to deal with environmental degradation, and we have to reverse this, and I think Dr. Jane, you referred to this, is that we have to tackle human poverty. If we do not tackle human poverty, then the natural environment will degrade because people will try to their best ability with the means that they have to improve their lives. And so I think looking at it from a Singapore perspective, we indeed grew up with an urban kind of experience, but for us to flourish, and we are told this all the time, are we not, that we have to live and work outside of Singapore. And so understanding the impact that we're going to make on the markets outside of Singapore for all the businesses who are in Singapore, I think is a key aspect.
Dr. Goodall, all these wonderful things being done, is it too late, really?
I wouldn't actually, I mean, what would be the point of my killing myself going around the world 300 days a year if I thought it was too late? I think it could get too late. I mean, I truly don't see how Mother Nature can continually renew herself. But we're not there yet. And, you know, there's so much blame these days on corporations, so much blame on governments. And I always say to people, you know, if you just spend a bit of time thinking about the consequences of the choices you make each day, you know, what do you buy? You don't have to buy a product if you're then going to point a finger at the company that made it and say, well, they made it, they're not ethical. But you bought their product. You know, so you blame the government because they haven't, the minister that you hoped would stand up and be strong for some environmental measure didn't do it. Well, find out, does he have 50% or more of his constituency behind him? Probably not. And, you know, he's a politician, so he's not going to stick his neck out because he wants to continue to be a politician. And if he's got really ethical values, he thinks, well, I can do more as a politician even if this particular issue doesn't come through now. So yeah.
For the young people who are angry and depressed, where are they going to find this optimism from? The optimism you have?
Well, this is what Roots and Shoots is all about. And of course we can't reach all the young people. And the question I get asked by so many young people is, how do I get my friends involved, you know? Well, once the Roots and Shoots Club starts, see, the idea is to have a curriculum which has the sort of philosophy, animals, people, environment, that we're all in it together, that we need better understanding, that we need to take action. That's a sort of curriculum. From that, you get the really passionate young people who want to roll up their sleeves, work out what to do, and do it. And once they start doing it, you know, we have these big festivals, and everybody comes, and we bring the media in. And certainly for middle schoolers, this is exciting. And so they do get their friends to come in. And once, you know, what so many Roots and Shoots members have said to me is, gosh, we've discovered that doing something to help really makes me feel good. Well, that's very exciting when it happens to be true. So joining up the Roots and Shoots, which has connections all over the world now. So, you know, one young man who started in 91 has now got his own business. He said, I've never forgotten that philosophy. I've never forgotten that every day I make a difference. And he said, I know anywhere I go in the world, even if I know nobody, if there's a group of Roots and Shoots, I found my family. And that, I think, is beautiful. It
is. It's beautiful and it's powerful. But I'm wondering if the great financial crisis of the past few years has taken the world's attention off the environment, if I can get all three of you to respond to that. But you first, Dr. Goodall. Do you find your work harder now? Because the last few years have been difficult ones for the world economy.
Well, in some ways, definitely yes. I hope that kind of crash and the bursting economic bubble and so forth would really start us off in a new way of thinking. But no, once we got over the shock, it was back again business as usual. And there wasn't a change in thinking about how are we going to get out of this kind of mess.
What change did you want to see?
I wanted to see us get together and think how we could develop without this constant economic development. There must be other ways, because if there aren't other ways, then the whole planet will collapse.
Zhu Yang, you're from the corporate world.
Yeah, I suppose it depends what you define as economic development, and I suspect, Dr. Jane, the reason why you worry, why we worry about unlimited economic development, is because we have visions that this will indeed result in a depletion of resources to an unsustainable level. But I think if we were to define that in ways of people getting a better life and managing their lives in a sustainable way, and that's a better economic development, then I think that's the direction we should go. I think the development of populations from a more rural base to a more urban base is a trend that has already passed the 50% mark. So more than half the world now lives in cities. So in a sense, we will have to learn again what sustainability means in an urban environment as opposed to a rural environment. And I think this is a challenge not just for businesses, but for individual families and units in the community.
Yeah. On the question was whether the economic downturn, people would lose attention to, pay less attention to environmental protection.
Or even if they wanted to, even if the attention is there, I mean, you can't help but notice that the environment is degrading.
I think the environmental agenda has risen to that certain critical level now, where it is always visible, and it's. I mean, I remember in '97 when we had the big Asian downturn, and I was working for the Environment Council. I mean, just all the attention on the environment it vanished, and we had to build that up again. But when you look at in this millennium, the post Lehman Brothers downfall, I think environment was still way up there on the agenda, and we were still discussing serious climate issues at that time. I think, on a day-to-day basis, generally when we see that there's less money around, less liquidity, corporations look more into efficiency measures. They look into cost savings. The cost savings they get from investing in green technologies start to look more attractive. For consumers, the same to be said. People use more public transport. They don't want to pay for hefty parking fees and etc. They start looking at their utility bills